So welcome, our 18th Security Thought Leadership webinar. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we hold a discussion about a topic of interest. And one of the things that we like to do in this area of thought leadership is bring you the latest topics and a great panel. And we keep it all moving quite quickly. And today, we're going to be talking about just how valued and valuable is security. What can we expect post-COVID-19? And it's sponsored by SGC Security Services. I'm very grateful to them for their support on this, and also for our supporting organisations. Because what I think is important is to recognise the quality of security we get in the future will in part depend on our ability to debate it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and once they've introduced themselves, I'll then come back to each of them to ask them for an opening statement. You will see at the bottom of your screen there's a question and answer button, so please use the question and answer button to ask any questions. In fact, while they're speaking, you may want to think about your question. The earlier you ask it, the more we're able to bring it in. And we'll do it all in 45 minutes. So action-packed, lots of questions, lots of answers. Let me ask the panel to introduce themselves, and I'll go first to Mark over in America. Mark.
Good day, everyone. I hope this finds everyone in good health with your families and taking care of everyone during this very difficult time. Living through a global pandemic is definitely something that we will find memorable, but most importantly, I think that we're making sure we're taking care of everyone that we can. And in our role, this is particularly important. Again, I'm in the United States of America. I know the OSPAs and Martin Gill through ASIS International, an industry effort where I'm a volunteer leader.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I just ask you just to say your name and affiliation? And once you've all done that, I'll come back to you for your opening statement. Just your name and affiliation. If
Absolutely. Like. And Mark Schreiber with Safeguards Consulting.
Okay. And Jaimo Grasa, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jaimo. I'm the regional head of security for Central Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa for a company that's called Medtronic. It's a medtech healthcare provider.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. And back to the United Kingdom, Paul.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Paul MacArthur. I'm the owner of SGC Security Services.
Thank you very much indeed. So now, Mark, let's come and have that opening statement from you. 3 minutes of wisdom about this topic, please.
Sure thing. Thank you, Martin. So as a design engineering firm, we specifically support how physical security countermeasures are applied within the facilities. And doing analysis and talking with infectious disease experts, we foresee that the demand for addressing return to work and COVID-19 is going to be a whole of organization approach. It's going to require everyone within the organization, but specifically the role of security to make sure that we support the infectious disease hardening measures is going to be required. So this will directly affect all of the facilities that we operate, and this will also directly affect the security role within this environment. We look forward to talking about that. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Let's come to Jaimo. Your opening statement, please, Jaimo.
Okay, and I will just, hopefully not take, more than, 3 minutes. I will not, promise. Just my statement up front straight away. Will security, be summed or replaced by different functional? And I think, whilst it depends on each of the roles at each of the organization, the complexity that we all operate in, I think for a company like ours, when we look at us, 95,000 employees in a global environment, we operate in 150 countries. There's no way that security is going to be replaced by either, safety or security or crisis management. We all have, a role to play, to help organizations to, navigate the complexities that operating in such in a global environment, brings. And but I think what I want to stress, and we've always done, is we always want to be, good partners, when it comes to working with those functions, when it comes to safety, when it comes to EHS, when it comes to crisis management. And we found ourselves, especially in the, me having a regional role in a large global organization, being almost a representative of all those functions in the region and helping drive those programs that might be, owned by corporate, but are not, resourced locally. And, when I look at, before, it was all about enabling and helping to navigate, the complexity, but also providing reassurance. And that's not going to go away. Even if we, during this particular crisis, we might have not found ourselves a security in the leading role, but we've definitely, found ourselves in a great partnership and a supporting role, be it sort of command center, that we have or operate internally, that was leveraged as a 24/7, central information and crisis escalation hub, be it by rolling out and being, and sharing or coordinating crisis management teams in the regions. That's again, a skill set, that we have brought to the table, and being now from an intelligence support perspective, trying to, look and help the business understand how what's happening right now, how this is going to impact the security environment and the environments you operate in, moving forward. And when, coronavirus or COVID, is going to be gone, the requirements are going to be the same, that we have seen before, that we will have afterwards as well. And so I don't feel that there's a big risk in a large organization like ours that will be, replaced or in any way, shape, or form by either of those functions. But what I want to reiterate, we really see ourselves as partners of those functions, as local representative of those functions, especially where those functions don't have resources in the regions themselves. That would be my opening statement.
Thank you very much indeed. So we got Mark with whole organisation approach, Jaime looking at the role of security in specific context. I'll come to you next. Paul, your opening statement, please.
Sure. The security industry has never been more important and relevant than it is now. And this, thankfully, has been recognised by the SIA in approving the key worker status to the UK security industry. The industry has come together stronger in the time of crisis, and we've been using best practices and resources to manage the current situation. We've got diamonds out there that have risen within the staffing pools, and this has been recognised through the public and through clients throughout. Staff have been going above the call of duty every day with a sense of bonding with clients and the public. Recently, Martin, there was a Guardian newspaper article in February that the retail food industry grossed an extra $2 billion on food and drink between the 24th of February and the 21st of March of this year. Sadly, our pay rates to our security staff are still topping within the retail sector of minimum wage. There's been multiple layers of subcontracting on a well-known large food retailer through a large organisation that was then subbed out numerous times. And we've got these guys and girls working front line, dealing with unhappy customers, fighting over toilet rolls in the aisles, and still they're getting paid a minimum wage rate in the UK. There's a current spotlight on us in the UK at the moment within the industry, and I hope once we're out of lockdown and out of COVID, the spotlight will not stop.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. And don't forget, there's a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. So do ask your questions on that, and then we'll come to you after we've heard from Brian. Brian, can I suggest to introduce yourself and just your opening statement, just 3 minutes, Brian, on your thoughts on this topic. I know you've got some strong ones.
Thanks, Martin. And hello, everybody. So Brian Allen, I'm former Chief Security Officer at Time Warner Cable, and I've run physical security, business continuity, and some cyber risk management as well. Today, I work for Ernst & Young and mostly work with executives on their security strategies and boards as well to meet some of their oversight obligations. Today, we're working quite closely with a number of very large organizations on looking at business continuity, their post-crisis, so they've been through a crisis, they're sustaining a crisis, and a lot of organizations are taking a focus on transforming their businesses as they come out of this crisis. And I think security has a role to play here, and if it doesn't, I think it'll be bypassed in a lot of ways. And I think, so what's this role? So clearly, there are a lot of diamonds in the rough. I agree with Paul. I mean, people have stepped up all over the place. And what's the end game for this now? Like, can you take advantage of this crisis and use it as a transformational moment for your organization? And I think where that comes into play goes beyond this business continuity, crisis management, being able to respond to a crisis, looking at postmortems, and are your crisis management plans effective? Were they effective? Were they not effective? I always used to tell our regulator when they would say, Brian, did your crisis plan work? And I would say no, because if it did, it'd be business as usual, right? It was a crisis because there were gaps and because we were scrambling a lot. And I think this moment, I think can go beyond what we are, what we're dealing with in the normal sense of there's a crisis and a postmortem and we make our plans better. if businesses are transforming, and they are going to, this has accelerated business in a lot of ways in how they function and use technology and operate and continue operating and find new markets. Can you take these lessons learned and move and help the company move to this transformational moment? Can you become strategic, right? Can you engage with not just lessons learned of the downside of risks, but can you engage in that upside of risk and help play in that role to say, look, this is what we learned from this crisis. This is how we can transform from a department to department, from a business standpoint. I think we are at that moment to be able to do that. If you don't, somebody's going to. And I do, as Martin said, I have some pretty strong opinions about security needing to move past these tactical functions where we are and have been to more of these strategic elements of what's being expected from business.
I thank you very much indeed. Right, let me come and start the questions. Raymond Obaji from Nigeria sent a question in advance, and Mark, I'm going to come to you first. And the point he was making is where is all this is going, and whether it really means a good thing for security. In your whole organisational approach here, is it obvious that security is going to play a significant role? From the outside, a whole organisation approach normally means security doesn't. Mark Schreiber, your views, please.
Absolutely. So I believe security does play a key role, and on the very base level, it's because what we're going to be asking for people to do as organizations open up and they return back to work are things that an average employee wouldn't necessarily be wanting to or trained to do. And so simply it's taking a lot of core functions that security operations does and just adding some additional elements to that. Same for cybersecurity and same for a lot of other organizations. But to Brian's point, if they're not willing or if they're not rapidly advancing to, someone else could easily take on that role, whether it's a health and safety team, crisis management team, even facilities could take on some of those roles if security is not willing to. But I definitely think security will be looked to first to try and make sure that they're providing a level of protection that will be required within a return to work during this pandemic.
Thank you. A question for Jaime and Brian. And let me ask you both this question. I mean, Brian, you put the case that here's an opportunity for security. Will it step up? What if I put the case unlikely, because security typically hasn't been at the high table, hasn't got the clout. And the truth of the matter is when the crisis is over, we'll go back to normal and the chance will be missed. Isn't that an equally plausible scenario and maybe even a likely one?
Yeah, if you stand still, I mean, everything's going to pass you by. Progress is going to pass you by. That's an absolute, right? And I fully agree. Look, there's always going to be a place for physical security. There's always going to be a place for tactics. What is changing now in the conversations that we're having with executives and boards is that, because of this economy, right? Because things are moving, because things are changing, because of the just-in-time economy, because of centralization of process, right? The disruption of business is becoming essential, and physical security components and crisis and of course cyber, right, can all be disruptive from a business resiliency sense. And so they're paying a different attention and they have a very different expectation today. And so yes, could it fall back to that position? Could it be tactical? We always, when the boards and the executives always ask, where should security sit, right? If you want a seat at this table, right, you want a seat at the proverbial table, executives don't put tacticians at their table. They put strategists at their table. So if you think strategically, execute strategically, report out strategically, you'll find yourself there, right? If you report out tactically, if you execute tactically, if you have the bat phone and you're ready to answer and that's what you think your role is, progress is going to pass you by. There is an expectation, and we're definitely seeing movement from an executive standpoint. I think it's very healthy for the security industry and what's happening.
Thank you, Brian. And Jaime, let's have a question to you, if I might. I mean, you spoke sort of in very positive terms, and I understand that. But it's easy in a way in a crisis to speak up the case for security. History tells us security is good in a crisis, but when things go back to normal, it's one of the more marginalized. Do you see, taking Brian's point, a seat at the strategic table afterwards?
Well, I think now it's the opportunity for us to seize. I think I want to make two statements. So Brian has mentioned tactics and everything else a couple of times over and over again. I think those are table stakes. there's a baseline expectation for us to have all of that squared away in the physical security side when it comes to facilities, travelers, internet management, crisis management. I think that all needs to be, squared away. Now it's a question of like, if the organizations are going to transform, and we've seen that in our organization and others already. What we're looking at, like, what are our risk capabilities, moving forward, and just being, those are discussions that are being held at board level or executive level -1, and being in those discussions on the right level with the right people, with the right mindset and the right outlook, and being good partners in that. That's, I think, where the opportunity lies right now, to ensure that that you are not left behind when this transformation is on the way. And I think just being part of the same discussions with those teams. And one thing that I always come back with is this partnership model, because we all have a role to play. And there is, for us in our organization, we with our command center and from a security perspective, from having local resources all over the globe, we really see ourselves as ambassador for all those discussions. We've had some, let's say, political challenges, maybe a year ago, but this crisis has really brought us together and has, enabled us, for us security as well as everyone else, to find its place on both on the tactical, operation, as well as strategic level. And so I think it's definitely an opportunity for us moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Come to you next, Paula, and a question from Erica Gibbons. Actually, she's asked the question I was going to ask you. So, and it says, Paul stated the security industry is still on the lower level of the pay scale. And how are you going to change this as everybody sees a security guard as invisible and very low skills with poor communication? And I think the point is, though, Paul, that no matter how much people like to speak up, that's the visible face of the security sector around the world. Your point is that even in a time of crisis, in an area where it's most influential, we're still on minimum wages. I mean, that just shows you security is not valued, and it really epitomizes the struggle. Is it changeable, Paul?
I think it can be changeable. A lot of this is sort of public perception, Martin, and if we look at the current situation that we're in, security and getting into security is an easy, quick fix to earn yourself some money. The career path seems to have gone out of it. When I got into it 20 years ago, there was a career path and a transition, whether you wanted to, go up for the ranks in in-house security or contract security, or even start your own business. I think the problem that we have now with social media, it's so easy now to go onto Facebook, if you've got an SIA badge, to get yourself some friends and some staff and actually sell yourself out to other companies from a subcontracting level. I think what's going to change this is eventually when the regulator brings in some sort of business licensing. That will then stop the rogue elements within the security industry popping up overnight, bidding themselves at the lowest hourly rate to go in to literally cover a site or to cover a job, even for a subcontracting perspective. I think, recently I've just been appointed to the SIA as the South of England regional lead, and this was one of the key topics on our conversation is how are we going to change the mindset in terms of making sure that our staff are valued and making sure that they are getting the correct hourly rates, where some of them can go to Lidl's and Aldi's, and no disrespect to Lidl's and Aldi's, and stack shelves for less than a risk than put themselves front line on a COVID ward in an NHS hospital doing bed watching, or even at a COVID testing centre. So I think it's going to have to come really from the regulator to go, right, we're going to put in now business licensing. We're going to stop these people setting up overnight, floating the rules, not paying the tax, not paying the national insurance, driving the rates down, and set a standard within the industry. And also it will give a buyer's perspective. Again, I just held recently a procurement webinar where procurement organisations and departments don't understand what ACS is, the approved contractor status. They just think it's a tick box exercise. But I think, again, it's public perception and getting across to clients that if you're an ACS provider, you are going above. It's a voluntary scheme and you're going above the minimum standard. Now, I'm not saying everyone should be an ACS company. It's up to individuals. But what I'm saying is there has to be, sooner or later within the UK, the regulator's got to step in and say, right, we are now going to regulate this industry, and these are the compliance checks. These are the rates of pay that you should be basically giving to your staff. London living wage, minimum wage, national minimum wage should be a thing of the past, especially within the security industry moving forward.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Mark, I'm going to come to you with a question from Sharon Hay, a very good one actually. A common thread running through these webinars is the need for security as a function to step and evolve. What if the business isn't ready for one reason or another? How does it step up and flex without alienating the decision makers? Is this right? We've spoken about this as it was given from the security perspective. Mark, what about the other side of the coin?
Absolutely, a very good question. And I think ultimately, Brian made a very good point about this, is this is a transformative opportunity for most organizations. So if you think about the organization's overall arching goals and how you can set that up for success, the real key thing is do whatever possible you can to help support that success. So if you're not able to do it internally, use external resources. Use whatever resources you have available to set up and transform the organization to make it address this pandemic, making them get back to returning to work, becoming functionally capable, and ultimately being able to turn a profit or reach the main goals. Because the organizations that can come through this crisis and show at the end that they're not only valuable, but they've been able to take advantage of these opportunities, those are the ones that are going to be growing into the next big companies and the next big security teams that we'll recognize in the future.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to ask Brian you the same question. I know this is something that in a way you've been working on. I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? That it's far from obvious that organizations are ready for good security. Brian Allen.
Yeah, I mean, they're always ready for good security, right? I mean, one of the things that has surprised me at EY that I find very interesting is how much transformation is happening pre-COVID with use of technology and expectations and coordination across business lines and who has what roles and responsibilities and how they're using technology. And I think, the core business functions have been in this movement to use technology and change, manufacturing, even human resources and operations. At some point, the security industry is going to be impacted by technology and how it's used and the expectation. And I don't know, I think this is going to speed that up. And I think this expectation is going to, I think you're going to see businesses because they're going to have to reset budgets. They're going to have to reset, some of their business operating models. And I think you're going to see this, this expectation of change. And I think we as an industry would have our heads in the sand to think that technology isn't going to disrupt what it is we do, how we do it, and the expectation that comes behind it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come to you, Homo, if I might, on the same question. But Charles Olu has added another dimension to this from Kenya. He's going to be on the panel in a couple of weeks' time, actually. And Charles just makes the point about the security people being able to demonstrate value to the business. And the security sector is quite good at talking to itself about how good it is. Mm-hmm. But I mean, speaking the language of business to business people, in your partnership and your working together you spoke about earlier, that's often been a barrier that's not really been acknowledged by security people. It's acknowledged by business people. Your thoughts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, there's, and I echo a little bit, what Mark said, before, is trying to understand, what's the strategy, what's the business, what does the business want to achieve? And I think the first important part is trying to understand what the business is about in the first place and speaking the language of the business. For a very basic example, for my team, the regional, we sell pacemakers, insulin pumps, all sorts of our equipment. The first thing I did, I got myself into an OR, trying to be as close to what we do as a product and a service as much as I can, to really try to understand what we're really here for. What's our mission? What do we want to achieve? And being able to relate to that and being able to find stories that can relate to our mission and what we are trying to achieve is the most important part, when it comes to success. And then, there's two dimensions, obviously, to this. Obviously, the way we talk about development, transformation, and everything internally, the level of language that we use, the level of complexity that we use, the way, our models, that we use, they are way too complex to be able to, in a discussion with a business leader or with the region or the business itself, they are too complex for that. And it's something for us that now is a question like, how can we tone this down? How can we make this simple? And how can we tie this to the language that the business talks? How can we tie this to the strategy, as Mark said at the beginning, that the business has in the region? And how can we fit our story around that what we do enables the business, and what we're going to do, how we're going to transform, is going to enable the business even more and better. So I think it's, there's the different aspects, to that question.
Let me ask you a question. Ask you a question. Very quickly, it's almost a yes, no because of time.
Yes.
Do you think your peer group are overall up to speaking the language of business in the way that you've described?
My peer group, no, but we should all go in that direction. And if given 10 seconds, the beauty that I have, of operating environment that incorporates the Middle East and Africa and Central Eastern Europe is security is very easy to sell here, especially from a physical security point, that it's needed. But you still need to go the extra mile of trying to understand, the language of the business and what the business does. And that has helped us really, being successful. And we're trying to get everyone on the same page, but it's something where we need to be better.
Okay. Let me come to Paul. Brian, yeah.
Yeah, I love this conversation of providing value, right? Because you have got, in order to get to that C-suite, you have to talk value. Take a look at the metrics of what most people are reporting. Most of what they report are effectiveness and efficiencies of their programs. That is not business language, right? That's talking about how effective and efficient you are in your programs. And guess what? It's business. You're supposed to be effective and you're supposed to be efficient. Those are good metrics to have. But translating that to the business conversation has to be a #1 priority if you want to become strategic and start getting that proverbial seat at the table, engaging in business in a different context. It's a great conversation. The term ROCE is a trap. It is the worst term that we've ever come up with in our industry, because you cannot survive talking about what your return on your security investment is without bringing in the asset owners and stakeholders and the impact of the business into that conversation. You cannot win that argument. It's not winnable. You shouldn't even entertain it at all. If somebody asks that question, what's your ROCE? You should challenge that question, because it's a really poor question. And the element behind that question is how you're perceived, which is tactical. Tell me about how effective and efficient you are, right? And that's what you're going to be able to return in the ROCE conversation. And that's not a business conversation that anybody wants to have.
But Brian, just a quickly, same question to you, because I want to go to Paul. Do you think the high-level security executives are up for being able to do that? I mean, is it the case they've got the skill set? I'm not about aspirations. I'm talking about ability from this crisis to do that. It's almost a yes, no, Brian, because of time.
Yeah, it's business. You're in business. This is business. You have to be able to talk that. And I think people who have been in this industry that get to that senior level role understand business. They have these political conversations every day. They just have to change, how they are perceived as tactical and how they perceive them and their teams as tactical. And how do you make that switch and be able to start talking in risk terms, because that's the strategy end of this.
Yeah. Right, thank you very much. I'm going to come to Paul now. Paul, I've got a question here from Adrian Cadmus-Dixon. It's this question says, do you expect a shift for security policies of business from being mainly reactionary to mainly precautionary because of COVID-19? Is that going to be an impact on the way that business is done? Paul, on the front line.
Yeah, I think if we've got to be honest, Mark, we've got to be preparing for the next sort of 18 months ahead, even in the current situation that we're in now. It's all well and good. When we first went into lockdown, there was a very knee-jerk approach to security. It was massive sort of deploy security here, deploy security in retail aisles, deploy security here. Then it sort of petered off as the lockdown sort of came into fruition even more and less people were going out. There was still always an element of security being deployed at NHS, in testing centres, in logistics centres, everything else. I think over the next couple of weeks, with the kids going back to school and in non-essential clientele and retailers being open, I think we will see another spike. I think clients will knee-jerk again and sort of start deploying additional security measures and crowd safety measures in place. I think personally we're going to see another spike within the UK of COVID in the coming months. What that's going to do for the country, I don't know. I'm not an analyst, but it's going to have a huge knock-on effect. But I think going forward, it's going to take the UK a good 18 months to get out of our current crisis. And I think clientele are going to be more planning and risk averse going forward, where they will possibly need to up their security in terms of the social distancing rules that may still be in place, in terms of one in and one out in various different stores or department stores. They may still to keep limitations in place. If they're going to open up, let's say about the food and beverage industry and the nightclubs and the pubs and clubs, they open up the pub industry, what's going to happen with the door staff? You know, if you've got one doorman currently running a nightclub or running a door on 200 entries going in, they're not going to be able to maintain social distancing once alcohol's been induced, and people are going to get overexcited. So there's going to be an additional need for security going forward. I think clientele need to plan now and plan for worst case scenarios, not just up until the end of this year, but I really do feel for the next 18 months.
Thank you very much indeed. Mark, I've got a couple of questions here. Katie Fellows sent a question in advance. And the question she's saying was about security sector has been associated with low pay and struggle sometimes to develop a good reputation because of that. She adds that, that one of the key ways going forward to show value is to show expertise. But there's an element in which security is being diluted, in which it's doing other tasks, in which it's taking on a broader role. And her question is about whether this dilutes the security function and becomes more of a generalist. And Lawrence Gituku has asked a question whether security professionals become more of generalists rather than concentrating 100% on security is beginning to show itself. Mark, first, your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, and some other of the panelists could definitely give some additional points of view on this one. But in the many organizations that we've supported and seen, you know, the generalization may help in the short term, but we've always found that organizations that specialize and then keep, you know, advancing their organization, their personnel, are the ones that ultimately become stronger and more capable and more effective for their organization. So I would recommend avoiding generalization unless you're being demanded to from your senior executives because there's no one else that can fill that role, but always focus strategically on what security can really do to support the business bottom line.
Yeah, Hemo, your thoughts on that? Would you agree?
Yes and no. You know, coming back, you know, what I started as a new headcount in an emerging market setting for us in Middle East and Africa. And when I first came on board, I was asked to also take on EHS, which was as a program non-existent. And it helped me immensely in the region, you know, to have discussions with the right business leaders on the right level, because EHS was a door opener at the time. It was easy to have the security discussion on top of that. And we built a program over 2 or 3 years, which allowed us to build, you know, a reputation in the area. And so once the EHS program was built out, we hired an EHS manager and handed it over again. So in my personal journey, it's been immensely helpful to take on additional roles and be a more, you know, generalist. And I think the higher you up, you know, in your professional career, the more, you know, especially also from a, you know, management or leadership perspective, it will be expected from you to be able to be more generalist, you know, and lead potentially additional functions, or depending on the requirements of the organization. Because sometimes, you know, there's no need, you know, for a security and EHS function in a region, but someone just needs to do the job. And I found it personally hugely beneficial, both from a professional reputation as well as personal development perspective.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Mark, just
yeah, carry on. Yeah, Brian.
So
yes.
Safety is, you know, so security is a risk practice. Safety is a risk practice. Business continuity is a risk practice. Fraud management is a risk practice. That's a promotion. That's not becoming a generalist, right? You're being promoted. When I see this broadening, right? I mean, I used to run aviation. Yeah, now I'm a business leader, right? I'm a business leader and a risk practitioner. I mean, but there are 2 different responsibilities. But I would take on every single one of those risk practices that you could absolutely get your hands on. That starts to pull you outside of this tactical space of just doing security. You want to be an absolute focused security expert? That's great. There will be a space for that. There's no doubt. You're going to need good tacticians to be great at what they do. But if you start taking on the other roles, they're all risk practices. Fundamentally, they all run on the same principles. And I think I would look at that as a promotion.
Interesting way of look at it. Brian, let me start with you on a question from Michael Gibbs, and he's really talking about the way in which we might begin to promote the sector and get it some value. And he says the Society for Human Resource Management was pivotal in elevating HR to a strategic function. To what extent is security elevation dependent on efforts of organisations such as Security Institute, ASAS, and many, many others in creating standards, certifications, doing credible research and marketing it? How much are we dependent on associations to be the point of difference here?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think otherwise we're looking at, anecdotes of, a handful of practitioners that are trying to pull everyone out of, this tactical space. It's got to be there, but it has to move. I mean, all of these associations have to move, and I do not see the pace and the need, like the focus and the pace and the critical element that we are in right now. Right? The cyber programs are moving fast. If they want to keep pace, if they want to get into this space and move into this risk space, they have to move a lot faster than they're moving today. But it is essential. Sherm did an amazing job of moving that organization from tactical to getting, human resources folks have seats at the table because they are directly engaged in business, right? That's why that happened. And they've done a nice job about building the right certifications and the right education and conducting the right amount of research that is progressive. And I do not see that, I see it in the cyberspace. They're moving in a pretty good direction, but they're also pulling the practitioners along, and that's going to have to happen in the trade organization space.
Can I just
interesting point, Paul? Yeah, Paul. Can I come to you about something Steve Gardner said as well, please? By all means, comment. But let me get Steve Gardner's question because we're running out of time. He says, if the demand for offices goes up to manage social distancing, queuing, park marshals, etc., are they going to? Is this going to affect the requirement of SIA to get more companies in, or will demand go up for current officers with a rising cost? So Steve Gardner just looking at those precise effects. If I can come to both points, but I need to be quick if you wouldn't mind, Paul.
Just following on from Brian's comment very quickly, totally agree. The only problem we've got to be careful is associations that we don't outprice ourselves in terms of enabling candidates to get on these courses. Some of these cyber courses, and cyber is not my experience. I will go to a cyber expert if I had a project. But the prices of some of the courses really, from sort of middle management down, pushes these guys and girls away from trying to go up to the next step of the ladder because they simply cannot afford. But I agree everything what Brian said on that point.
Okay, and just Steve Gardner's point about SIA requirements, given the changes that are going to be happening with regards to demands on security officers on the front line.
I think the demands are going to be more and more. If we look at the crowd safety sector at the moment, Martin, it's gone completely depleted. So there is going to be additional staffing within the industry that will come out of the crowd safety sector side and moving more into the security function and role. There's going to be no music events. Football's going to be behind closed doors, so it's going to be very, very limited in terms of licensing what needs to be deployed. There's a number of different programs that are taking place at the moment in the UK where the SIA have relaxed the online training for CCTV and also security operations. So that's now sort of moving along quite nicely. Is it the way forward? Personally, for me, no, because we lose that touch of that classroom instructor environment. But I think the SIA have moved very, very quickly to ensure that we do have a temporary fix if we need to bring in new labour to get them licensed and trained. Whether the SIA licensing portal keeps up to date with that and how quickly that moves, that's probably another discussion and a topic. I don't think we will see a shortage of security staff in the United Kingdom. I think we'll see more of the security staff coming through further and developing their skill sets even more. But I can't see us being very, very short. Not what's going on at the moment in terms of even in the next 18 months. I honestly feel, and Steve and I have spoken about this previously on a previous webinar, I think the market's going to be flooded. I think there's going to be a huge knee-jerk reaction where people are going to want to get into the security industry for all the wrong reasons, and that is simply to earn some extra money on their side. If they've been furloughed for their normal job outside the security family industry, there's an opportunity for them to get their badge for the next 3 to 4 months, just to pick up some easy cash and quick cash, then go back onto their normal job after. I don't criticize anybody that's going to do that to feed their family, but I can't see us being in a shortage, not at all.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask each of you now just for your closing comment, just 30 seconds if you wouldn't mind. Maybe sum up what your thoughts are, the key components of this security being valued and valuable post-crisis, the key components of what changes need to take place. Mark, your final comments, please. Just 30 seconds if you wouldn't mind, Mark.
Absolutely, Martin. And so my company did a pretty extensive research, and we put out a guidance document specifically on return to work planning. And as we started to unpeel this onion, we realized that the impacts of this pandemic and trying to work within this pandemic touch on every area of the organization. So you definitely have the opportunity to identify where security can provide value for every single department and every single employee within an organization. So if you take advantage of that and you communicate that and you express that, there's a great deal for your organization to do that. If you sit on the sidelines and you don't take advantage of those opportunities, you'll just be minimalized while someone else takes advantage of that effort. So it really comes down to leadership and application of these measures.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to Homer. Just your final comments, please. Just 30 seconds maximum, please, Homer.
Okay. Table stakes are table stakes. You know, all what we talked about, tactical, that just needs to be in place anyways. And I think right now it's about understanding where you fit in and how you can support your business partners, be it BCM, be it employee labor relations, be it EHS, be it the business. And there's many opportunities around that. And then, you know, moving forward is really being part of the discussion when it comes around risk capabilities and how we're going to transform those moving forward, and having the discussion on the right level. And again, being a good partner in all of those areas, I think, is essential.
Thank you very much indeed. Brian Allen. Brian, just your final comments, please. Just 30 seconds if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I don't think anything changes. Your job is to advance the mission of the organization that you're protecting, period. Are you doing that, or are you not doing that? Doesn't matter. Yeah, be effective, be efficient, but are you advancing and are you communicating the value that you're providing? And that is about risk, right? And this balance of risk is not security's decision. It has to engage the business in this process. I don't think anything changes at all. Your job is to advance the mission's purpose, right? Its value. It's the same as it always was. It's not about security. It's about business.
Yeah. Fascinating. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I'll leave the final comment to you, Paul. That seems appropriate. Paul, your final thoughts in just 30 seconds, please.
Just, yeah, I agree, sort of echoing on what Brian says. I think we're in a unique opportunity within the security industry now to really continue to shine through in what we do. Having that recognition, as I mentioned earlier on, being a key state of workers is fantastic. The industry, the regulators taken on board a number of comments that we've raised and gone back in terms of the ACS companies not being allowed to subcontract to further ACS companies. That's been stopped. And I think really to embrace our staff and not just sell ourselves so cheap, because the ultimate impact, okay, I'm a business owner, great, profit is there. But at the end of the day, if we're putting out a labour force that is so weak, so depleted in terms of hourly rates, this industry is never going to grow and it's never going to change. And I think now is our opportunity for all of us to come together to say, right, okay, we're going to stop now. We're going to take a grasp on what we're actually doing as an industry, regroup, and don't sell ourselves so cheap to stop the race to the bottom.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all my panelists for their view. I mean, what is clear on this subject of value, it's been a holy grail. And Brian Allen makes an interesting point that's always been security's point of view, and others are seeing this is a real opportunity to be different. And I guess what we're going to have to be clear about is the context in which those opportunities arise. And of course, the question marks that must remain about how well security is positioned and how well security professionals are positioned to exploit that. So as normal, I'll write a blog on what our panelists have been saying, and a copy of the video will be available on the website for you to review as from tomorrow. My very grateful thanks to SGC Security for sponsoring this, and indeed all our supporters for the help that they've given. Thank you very much to all our questions as well. There were so many questions today. I did my best to get through, but I'll try and incorporate you in a future webinar if you keep those questions coming. Just to say, this thing about value, it is fundamental to the security world that we recognize those who are outstanding at what they do. And in doing that effectively, we have to understand and be clear that we can learn from the best. So as part of that, I would encourage you, please, to make one nomination of anyone that you think is particularly outstanding in one of these countries: India, US, Benelux, Kenya, Romania, Australia, and the UK. They're all open at the moment. And finally to say, we go through all again on Thursday, when I have another panel, this time from Canada, the United States, Kenya, and the United Kingdom. We'll be contemplating worst case scenarios, how equipped is security to deliver. So hopefully see you at 3:30 on Thursday. Once again, thanks again very much to my panel, absolutely outstanding insights and right level of controversy and thought-provoking thoughts. My thank you to you for asking the questions, and wherever you are in the world, stay safe.